Hello everybody, this is Mr. Laubach. Thanks for joining me. In this video, we are going to go over the end of Native American independence in the western portion of the United States. We're going to dive into a profound and sobering chapter in American history. This is also a time period known in history as the Indian Wars. In terms of time period, think of the second half of the 1800s. Within just about 2.5 decades after the Civil War, the Plains Native American tribes lost their autonomy and their way of life changed forever. The seeds of this monumental shift were sown by the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869. The railroad brought settlers, farmers, miners, and ranchers into the West in overwhelming numbers, encroaching on Native American lands. Whether the tribes cooperated with these settlers or resisted them, the result was tragically the same. They were displaced and confined to reservations under government supervision. Now, there were a bunch of events which illustrated this conflict. We're going to start with the Sand Creek Massacre, which happened on November 29, 1864, when the Colorado militia, led by Colonel John Shivington, attacked a peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho village camped along Sand Creek. Even though the village had put up both the U.S. flag and a white flag of truce, the militia killed over 200 people, most of them women, children, and the elderly. It was a brutal and shocking attack that stirred outrage and deepened mistrust between Native American tribes and the U.S. government, and led to a lot more violence in the region. Now, the federal government during this time did not aim to exterminate the Plains tribes, but it also didn't allow them to stand in the way of Western expansion of settlers. Instead, a combination of missionaries and schools were employed to, quote, civilize Native Americans and integrate them into mainstream American society. Now, many Native American tribes resisted. Among them, the Sioux became the most iconic symbol of defiance. In 1865, the U.S. government announced plans to build a road through Sioux lands, sparking what became a prolonged conflict. The Sioux waged war effectively, with notable successes like the 1866 ambush that left 88 soldiers dead. A treaty was eventually signed in 1868. Granting the Sioux a reservation in the Black Hills of South Dakota. But peace did not last long. Gold was discovered in the Black Hills, and miners flooded the area, reigniting conflict. Sioux leaders like Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse took their people off the reservation, leading to confrontations with federal troops. The most infamous clash occurred in 1876 at the Battle of Little Bighorn. General George Custer, who was a Civil War hero, vastly underestimated the Sioux forces. He then led an attack that resulted in his death and the annihilation of more than 200 of his men. Although a significant victory for the Sioux, it was short-lived. The U.S. government sent reinforcements, eventually forcing the Sioux back onto their reservations. The Sioux weren't alone in their struggle. Tribes like the Nez Perce also tried to escape their reservations, but were ultimately defeated and compelled to return. Chief Joseph, who was the leader of the Nez Perce, is best known for his 1877 attempt to lead his people to safety in Canada after the U.S. government forced them off their land. Despite a 1,400-mile retreat marked by brilliant strategy, the Nez Perce were surrounded and surrendered near the border. His poignant words, quote, "I will fight no more forever," end quote, symbolized the despair of his people as they were relocated to reservations, losing their land and independence. Even if Native Americans had achieved more battlefield victories, they faced another devastating obstacle: the disappearance of the buffalo. Plains tribes relied on buffalo for food, clothing, tools, and much more. Settlers with government support hunted the buffalo to near extinction, stripping the tribes of their primary resource and way of life. By the late 1800s, most Native Americans in the West were living on reservations, depending on government rationing of land. Eastern reformers believed assimilation into white society was the solution, leading to the passage of the Dawes Act in 1887. This legislation sought to transform Native Americans into farmers by dividing reservation land among individual tribe members. Ironically, this well-intended act resulted in the loss of native land, and many sold their plots to settlers or speculators. The despair felt by the Plains tribes culminated in a religious movement known as the Ghost Dance movement. Followers believed the ritual would restore their way of life, bringing back the buffalo and driving away white settlers. However, the U.S. military viewed the Ghost Dance as a threat. In 1890, tensions boiled over when Sitting Bull was killed during a botched arrest. A group of ghost dancers fled the reservation only to be surrounded by federal troops at Wounded Knee. During the disarmament, a shot was fired, leading to a massacre that claimed the lives of over 200 men, women, and children. This tragedy marked the end of armed Native American resistance. Finally, in 1889, the Indian Territory of Oklahoma was opened to settlement by white settlers. The land rush that ensued was emblematic of the larger process that saw Native Americans displaced from the Great Plains. People who entered Oklahoma a day early to grab the land were called Sooners, which is the reason that Oklahoma is now known as the Sooner State. So as you can see, this was a very devastating time period in American history and really changed things forever for Native Americans. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned more about the period which is often known as the Indian Wars of the late 1800s. Have a great rest of the day.